Welcome back. Today, I'm going to say something that might surprise a lot of people because for a long time, I've been very hard on Bitcoin. I've called it out. I've questioned it. I've looked at the dark side of where it came from and how it was used, who used it, and why the story around Bitcoin has never fully sat right with me. But today, I'm going to do something different. I want to explain Bitcoin better than most Bitcoin maximalists ever explained it themselves. Because whether I like Bitcoin or not, whether I trust the story or not, there's one thing I have to admit. Bitcoin represents something truly powerful. It represents the idea that no bank, no government, or no central authority, nor corporation, no CEO, no boardroom, or no elite institution can walk in and put the handcuffs on the network and change the rules. And that matters because this is where the story gets messy. Because Bitcoin may be decentralized today, but the beginning of Bitcoin, that's the story that's not clean to me, not even close. So Bitcoiners will tell you that Bitcoin is different from everything else because there's no company behind it. And on that point, they're 100% right. There's no Ripple Labs behind Bitcoin. There's no Stellar Development Foundation behind Bitcoin. There's no Chainlink Lab style entity driving Bitcoin's business development. There's no company holding monthly escrow releases. There's no founder on stage giving keynote speeches. There's no executive team shaking hands with the banks. Bitcoin just exists. The code was released. The network was launched, the miners came in, and the users showed up. And the strongest creators disappeared. Bitcoin just exists. The code was released, the network was launched, and then miners came in, users showed up, and the creators disappeared. So that is the strongest argument Bitcoiners have. But it's also the strangest part of the entire story because Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever or whatever Satoshi was, is believed to have mined roughly 1 million to 1.1 million Bitcoin in the early days. Now, that's around 5% of Bitcoin's maximum 21 million supply. So those coins have remained untouched for more than a decade. The dormant stack is one of the biggest mysteries in financial history, period. Think about it. 1 million Bitcoin, not a few thousand, not a nice early bag, 1 million. At $100,000 a coin, that's 100 billion. And at the all-time high, that's 150 billion. And the world just supposed to believe that some person or a group that created the most disruptive monetary technology in modern history just walked away. No speech, no victory lap, no return, no explanation, just silence. That's not normal. And when we get into the most important moments in Bitcoin's early history, April 27, 2011, where Gavin Anderson, one of Bitcoin's earliest and most important developers, posted publicly on Bitcoin Talk that he had accepted an invitation to give a presentation about Bitcoin at CIA headquarters in June 2011. At an emerging technologies conference in the US intelligence community, right? And the way Gavin wrote it really matters. He basically said, I want to get this out in the open because this is the kind of thing that will generate conspiracy theories. Of course it would. Bitcoin wasn't even Main Street yet. Bitcoin was not the Bitcoin that we know today. This is not the Wall Street ETFs. This is not BlackRock. This was not CNBC talking about Bitcoin price targets. This was a small, strange, and disruptive internet money project that most of us in the world still had no clue about. And yet somehow the CIA already had it on the radar. Gavin said that he accepted the invitation because the fact that he was invited meant Bitcoin was already on their radar, and he wanted to explain why Bitcoin could make the world better. He also disclosed that he would be paid a one-time fee of $3,000 to cover expenses at that time. Now listen carefully. I'm not saying one meeting proves that Bitcoin was captured. I'm not saying that one meeting proves that CIA created Bitcoin. I'm not saying that the meeting proves anything that changed, today. But I am saying this. If you're going to tell me that Bitcoin's origin story is perfectly clean, perfectly organic, and perfectly untouched, perfectly pure, then you have to explain why one of the lead early developers was invited to the CIA headquarters in 2011. You have to explain why Satoshi disappeared around that same time. And explain to me why the creator's mass wallet remains untouched with 1 million tokens. You have to explain why the creator's mass wallet remains untouched today. And explain why one asset that is supposedly outside the system was on the radar of the intelligence almost immediately. And you have to explain why Bitcoin went to become one of the currencies of the internet's darkest corners before it became the trophy asset of Wall Street. Because that's part of the story too. Bitcoin was used on Silk Road. Bitcoin was used across the dark web. Bitcoin became the payment rail for almost anything that most normal people want nothing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is evil itself. A technology can and will be neutral. Cash is used for crime. Internet's used for crime. Cars are used in crimes. So are phones. But when we're talking about trust, money, freedom, and the future of global finance, we can't ignore how Bitcoin actually moved through history. And where my conflict with Bitcoin comes from, because on one hand, Bitcoin is the purest decentralized financial network in the world and has ever seen. On the other hand, its origin stories has shadows all over it. This is the split for me. This is the tension. This is why Bitcoiners defend it like a religion. And that's why people like me look at it and say, I understand the power, but I don't fully trust the story. Now let's talk about why Bitcoiners are so locked in. Because you need to understand their conviction. You have to understand that what they're really truly afraid of. They're not just buying Bitcoin because they want the number to go up. The real Bitcoiners believe that buying Bitcoin is because they believe in the entire financial system is fully corrupt. They believe that governments print money endlessly. They believe that central banks manipulate currency. They believe the IMF, the World Bank, commercial banks, and the financial elites have built a system where countries, businesses, and everyday people are always in debt to someone above them. And you ask why? How is a country in debt? The next question that you should ask yourself is, in debt to who? That's where the rabbit hole starts, because every average person goes to work, pays taxes, and tries to save money, watches inflation destroy their purchasing power, then go to a bank and beg for a mortgage, then pay interest for 25 to 30 years just to own a home. Meanwhile, people closest to the money printer get richer by the truckload. The people closest to the financial infrastructure get stronger. The people farthest away from it get squeezed. That's the system. And Bitcoin was born as a rebellion against that system, period. Bitcoin said no central bank, no bailout, no CEO, no monetary policy committee. The emergency money printing is over. No one's changing the supply. No one's deciding who gets access or who doesn't. Just 21 million coins, and that's the magic of Bitcoin. That's why Bitcoiners stand their ground, because the government can't call Bitcoin customer service. There is no Bitcoin office. There's no Bitcoin boardroom. There's no Bitcoin CEO to threaten, right? So there's no company to treasury to freeze. There's no escrow to negotiate. There's no founder to drag into court and force into settlement. That is real and that is powerful. And that's why Bitcoin deserves respect. But here's where I break away from the maximalists, because Bitcoin may be the cleanest version of the monetary escape, but it's not the full solution the world that is coming towards. The world is not just moving towards a store of value of assets. The world is moving towards programmable finance, tokenized assets, instant settlement, digital identity, smart contracts, automated compliance, cross-border liquidity, CBDCs, stable coins, real-world asset tokenization, institutional blockchain rails. And this is where Bitcoin hits a wall. Bitcoin is powerful because it refuses to play ball with intermediaries. Fine. But the new global financial system is going to be built by intermediaries adapting. So this is a piece that Bitcoin maximalists don't want to hear. The banks aren't going to go lay down. The governments are not going to go disappear. And the IMF and central banks, settlement networks, custody providers, exchanges, payment companies, and regulators are not going to wake up one morning and say, you know what? I think Bitcoin won. Let's all go home, guys. No, they're going to adapt. They are going to tokenize. They're going to regulate. And they're going to build rails. They are going to connect CBDCs, stable coins, bank deposits, tokenized securities, and real-world assets in the new financial internet. And that's already happening. According to the Bank for International Settlements, 91% of 93 central banks surveyed in 2024 were exploring retail CBDCs, wholesale CBDCs, or both. And the Atlantic Council CBDC tracker says that every G20 country except the United States is already exploring advanced stages or pilot phases. SWIFT, the backbone of messaging network used by over 11,500 financial institutions in over 200 countries, has already been testing ways to connect CBDCs, tokenized assets, and existing financial system. On November 22nd, 2025, SWIFT ended the coexistence period between the old MT messages and ISO 20022 for cross-border payments, marking a major shift towards richer, more structured payment data. And that's not a theory. That is infrastructure moving. That is the old system upgrading itself. That is the bridge between traditional finance and blockchain-based finance being built in real time. And Bitcoin is not designed to be the main operating system for that world. Bitcoin is designed to resist that world. That is its strength. But it also has limitations. Now look at XRP. XRP is completely different. XRP was built for speed, liquidity, settlement, and cross-border movement of value. And XRP Ledger has a fixed original supply of 100 billion XRP. And transaction fees are burned, meaning each transaction permanently destroys a tiny amount of XRP every time it's used. The current minimum transaction cost for a standard XRP Ledger transaction is 0.00001 XRP. Ripple placed 55 billion XRP in escrow in 2017 to create a supply predictability with up to 1 billion XRP released per month. And unused XRP typically return to the new escrow. Now, Bitcoiners look at that and say, there it is. There's the problem. And I understand the argument. They say that if XRP has a company attached to it, they say Ripple still has influence. They say Ripple still holds a massive amount of XRP. They say if regulators, courts, institutions, and powerful interests pressure the company, there's a point of contact. There's a door to knock on. There is a team, there's an office, there's executives. That's the Bitcoin maximalist argument. And again, I understand it and I respect it. But here's the other side. The same structure is exactly why utility coins can integrate into the real world. Banks do not adopt mystery, governments don't adopt chaos, and institutions don't move trillions of dollars through a system that they cannot audit, cannot understand, and cannot integrate, and they cannot regulate. This needs teams, they need standards, they need accountability, they need legal clarity, and they need partnerships. They need liquidity, they need enterprise-grade infrastructure, and they need compliance. So that's where the utility assets dominate because XRP, XLM, Chainlink, Quant, Hedera, Algorand, and other serious utility projects are not just trying to build digital gold. They're trying to rebuild the rails. XRP for liquidity and cross-border settlement, XLM for fast, low-cost value transfer, Chainlink for Oracle's smart contracts into the real world, Quant for interoperability between all networks, Hedera for enterprise-grade distributed applications, and Algorand for scalable, efficient blockchain infrastructure. This is not a meme coin. This is not meme coin speculation. This is not the numbers going up. This is the plumbing. This is the new financial machine being assembled piece by piece. And the reason I focus on utility coins is because I believe in the future will not be one extreme or the other. It will be not purely Bitcoin only freedom, and it won't be pure CBDC controlled finance. It will be a battle and a hybrid, a messy transition, a world where governments want control, banks want survival, institutions want efficiency, and we want freedom. And the assets that can operate inside that collision are the ones that I'm watching. Now, let's bring this back to the Clarity Act, because this is where things can get very interesting. The digital asset markup clarity is designed to establish clear rules whether digital assets are treated as security, commodity, or something else. And the Senate Banking Committee advanced the bill on May 14th, making it a major milestone for digital asset legislation in the United States. The bill is important because it starts creating a framework for when digital assets can be considered sufficiently decentralized, when it falls under the CFTC oversight, when the SEC has authority, and how platforms and issuers fit into that system. So it's also reported that legislation creates a transition process for some assets that could move from an investment contract treatment towards a commodity treatment once the underlying networks reaches sufficient decentralization. So that matters because the future of crypto is not about technology. It's about classification. It's about who controls it, who issues it, who profits from it, and who maintains it. who can exchange it, who can be sued, and who can be regulated, who can be pressured. That is why Bitcoiners say that Bitcoin is different, because Bitcoin has no company, has no issuer, no CEO, no escrow, no formal leadership, no foundation with a giant treasury controlling the narrative. And in the eyes of many regulators, that makes Bitcoin the cleanest digital commodity that exists. But here's the mistake that Bitcoiners make. They think because Bitcoin is the cleanest regulatory asset, everything else is worthless. Now that is completely insane, because the world doesn't run on only clean philosophy. The world runs on infrastructure. The internet wasn't built by one protocol. The financial system will not be rebuilt by one coin. Bitcoiners can take the escape hatch, but utility networks can be the replacement rails of the entire system. Bitcoin can be the vault. Utility coins can be the machine. Bitcoin can be the rebellion. Utility assets can be the reconstruction, and that is the difference. And that is where younger generations come in, because the world has changed massively. The old dream is completely broken. A 17-year-old kid today is not looking at life the same way that they did 40 years ago. They're not saying, I can work till, 50 hours a week, pay half of my income in taxes, save whatever is left, beg the bank for a mortgage, pay interest for 30 years, retire at 65, and hope I have enough money to enjoy the rest of life. That dream is for a lot of people. Housing's too expensive, food's too expensive, taxes are too high, debt is everywhere. Wages don't keep up. And people are waking up to the fact that the system wasn't designed to make them free. The system was designed to keep them productive, taxable, borrowable, and controllable. That's why young people are moving towards crypto. That is why they're moving towards digital assets. That's why they're moving towards self-custody. That's why they're moving towards decentralized finance. They're not just chasing money. They're chasing an exit. They want sovereignty. They're looking at what's optional. They want assets that they can own directly. They want systems that do not require blind trust in banks, politicians, institutions, or middlemen. And how can you blame them? I can't. Because we now live in a trustless society. And that's exactly why blockchain matters. Smart contracts matter because people don't trust each other. Immutability matters because records get changed. Self-custody matters because accounts get frozen. Decentralization matters because power is corrupt. And transparency matters because backroom finance has abused people for generations. This is why blockchain is not going away, everybody. This is why digital assets are not going away. And this is why tokenization is not going away. This is why DeFi is not going away. This is why the world needs a system where trust is not promised, it's programmed. So where do I stand? Well, here's the honest answer. I respect Bitcoin more than ever. I understand why Bitcoiners fight for it. I understand why they call it the only truly decentralized asset. I understand why they distrust companies, foundations, bankers, regulators, CBDCs, stablecoin issuers, and every project with a boardroom attached to it. I get it. But I also see the fuzz in the story. I see Gavin Anderson going to the CIA headquarters in 2011. I see Satoshi Nakamoto disappearing. I see roughly 1 million Bitcoin sitting dormant. I see early Bitcoin becoming the money of the dark web. I see intelligent interest. I see Wall Street now buying it up. I see ETFs, institutional custody, and massive players accumulating supply. And I cannot pretend that Bitcoin's story is perfectly clean. It is powerful. It is decentralized. And it's historic, but clean? No, not to me. And that's why my heart and my money lean towards utility, because I believe in the biggest wealth transfer, if not only coming from holding digital gold, but it'll come from owning the infrastructure that replaces the old financial system. And so does other XRP holders. For cross-border payments, tokenized assets, CBDC interoperability, stablecoin settlement, real-world data, smart contracts, institutional DeFi, automated compliance, decentralized identity, global liquidity. That's where I believe the future is being built. Bitcoin may stand outside the system, but utility coins are being built to transform the system. And that's the difference to me. Bitcoin is the protest. Utility is the takeover. Bitcoin is the asset they can't easily control. Utility coins are the rails they may be forced to use. Bitcoin is the locked door. Utility is the new highway. And when I look at the future, I don't believe that the world chooses only one. I believe we get both. A world where Bitcoin remains the ultimate decentralized store of value, and the world where utility assets power the next generation of finance. But where it comes to where I see the biggest opportunity, when it comes to where I see real world adoption, when it comes to where I see governments, banks, businesses, payment networks, and institutions being forced to upgrade, that's why I focus on XRP. That's why I focus on XLM. That's why I focus on Chainlink. That's why I focus on quant. That's why I focus on utility, period. Because this is bigger than crypto. This is the rebuilding of money itself. And if you're only looking at the price charts, you're missing the story. You have to look at the origin. You have to take a look at the power structure. You have to take a look at the regulation. You have to look at the rails, and you have to look at who benefits. You have to look at who's afraid. You have to look at and ask the real questions. Is the asset you're holding just a bet, or is it part of the new financial system being built right in front of your eyes? That is the question. And that's why I make these videos, period. Not to tell you what to buy or not to tell you what to believe, but to force you to look deeper. Because the people who understand this early are not just buying coins. They're positioning themselves for the next era of money. And that era is already here.